Good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be here, so thank you for the invitation, and also really pleased to see so many familiar faces in the audience, very much friends. Some beautiful big smiles out there too. Be brave, make change. What a wonderful week this is, Reconciliation Week. And for 65,000 years, this great state has enjoyed amazing levels of multiculturalism and many different languages, many different cultures, many different ways of life. And that's just in the richness that's our First Nations people. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of land upon which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and any emerging elders in the room. For those that haven't heard me say this before, I got chipped one day by an Indigenous leader. He's like, mate, what's this emerging elders crap? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, nah, they haven't earned their stripes, don't acknowledge them. I was like, all right. I was a bit nervous. So I didn't that day, but herein I've always kept to acknowledge them. You've had some wonderful speakers, and I am certainly nowhere near as interesting or as intelligent as some of the fascinating people that you have heard speak today. Hopefully one of the things that you will see, though, is the passion and the authenticity. And the thing that Ida wanted me to really remind you all today is the approachability, because I have the great privilege of doing my job, but I certainly don't have all the answers. They come from you. And a key part of what I am here to do is be able to be a conduit and an opportunity for you to connect into big government and ultimately make really positive change. I'm going to touch on a couple of those things today. So to Ali Marley this morning, who I consider a very good friend, and also Vic Aladef, who is one of the eldest statespeople and was the chair of Multicultural New South Wales, whose shoulders I walk upon. Great to see you both here, and thanks for sharing your wisdom. Often people talk about Vic for his Jewish Board of Deputies work, and that was good. And they talk about his work at Multicultural New South Wales, and that was good. And they talk about he's on SBS, and that's good. But the thing that Vic did that is probably not as well known unless you get to know him a bit more is his work in the race hate laws in New South Wales. And so he was critical and instrumental in Section 93Z, which for a period of time was very unpopular legislation. And some will even know that it got voted down the first time. But Vic, as he always does, he's tenacious. He's like a small chihuahua at a gate, until you open the gate, and then he's lovely and you can pat him and give him a cuddle. But up until that point, he's very tenacious, and he did not let that go. And so now, for those that don't know, Section 93Z stops people publicly and threatening to incite violence on the basis of race, religion, and sexual orientation. So please join me in acknowledging that incredible work from Vic. Can I just say, for the Baha'i community, you punch well outside of your weight division in terms of the size of your community. You are an incredible community that just espouses values around equality, progressive philosophies, yet so many great conservative values around the connection to family and belonging and the sense of self. And I think that sucks along a lot of us, really in to what is just such an amazing and safe place to be. So to the leaders of those organisations such as IDA and the team that have put this on, thank you very much. We really all do love being here. And I think the best parts of your religion and the majority of your religion is something that we all connect with, because they're actually the best parts of humanity. So a big thanks to all of you for having me. So for those, we're going to clap everything I say. Oh, this is nice. No wonder Vic keeps coming back to this conference. I didn't get this love last year on Zoom. Where was that? I didn't get any. This is good. I'll make the most of this. Should I get a pay rise? No, a bit awkward. Okay. Look, it's been a big couple of years. I don't need to tell you that. I started in my job on the 14th of January 2019. Within 3 months of being in my job, I'd seen the Christchurch terror attack, the San Diego shooting, and the Sri Lankan bombing. And I thought, is anyone not okay with swearing? Is this being recorded? This is. I thought, sheesh. It's probably the wrong word. I thought, sheesh. This job is beyond me. It's absolutely beyond me. What a very difficult time. And the reason that I thought that after 3 months, as you all know, if something happens to the Jewish community in San Diego, it hurts all of our communities in New South Wales. If something happens in Christchurch, it's happening here. If something happens in Sri Lanka on Easter, one of the holiest acknowledgements, it's happening here. And I just thought, God, what an awful job. Really, like the fact that so many of these different parts of what happens across the world can have a profoundly unsettling, destabilizing, and just invoke so much grief on the wonderful people of New South Wales. I just thought, nah, you can have it back. And I meant that because I was just so overwhelmed. But then I got to see the best bits in humanity. I got to see interfaith leaders come and support each other and console each other and stand in solidarity like I've never seen before. I got to see community leaders that had no relationship to some of these other faiths and some of these other community organisations extend themselves and their places of worship and their physical community halls and all the other things that they have to these different groups and remind them that they were not alone and that there is one race, the human race, and largely, as much as there's 146 different faiths, that there is a real religion in New South Wales around belonging. And it just supercharged me and spurred me on. And then Mother Nature gave us a real big kick in the backside and reminded us the importance of putting our climate and our place and our earth at the centre of our thinking, didn't she? With the catastrophic bushfires of 2019, quickly followed by some floods, followed by some more bushfires, followed by COVID, followed by some more floods, by some more bushfires. It's been an incredible, difficult 3 years for many of you in the room. Yet the flip side of all of this is the real resilience, these new networks, these new partnerships, these new connections, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the interfaith dialogue. I have never, ever witnessed such strong interfaith dialogue as I do today. The commonalities in our religious leaders and what they share with each other around the importance of education and shared appreciation around scripture and reminding each other of the commonalities in their respective faiths. It's inspiring. And yes, of course, they've got their differences, as they could and they should. These practices have been established and around for thousands of years. But the modern interpretation of those practices and how that can be applied to a connected and cohesive society, which is the very essence of why we're here today in the room around social cohesion, just underpins so much of what they do. And again, inspires people like me and the organisation I represent. Social cohesion cannot be taken for granted. And for those that have any experience in a place called Bendigo in regional Victoria, you're a Victorian. Anyone else a Victorian? Yeah, legends. I'm a Victorian. I sold my soul to come to Sydney, but I'm still a Victorian at heart. But I'm paid by the New South Wales government, and they are the best government out of any of the governments. So for those that don't know, go back about 5 or 6 years ago in Bendigo, there was some real instability. And there was some extreme and minority voices that were having a profound impact in unsettling that community, pushing xenophobic views, really threatening and challenging the community of Bendigo around what it meant to be, to look, to believe in difference. And there's a whole lot of really intelligent people, and I know Hugh and others, wonderful demographers, came together, Lee Marley, and they're like, right, how do we do? And we're like, okay, we've got to change the perspectives of these marginal views and bring them back more in line with mainstream views. And what do you think happened? Nothing. You couldn't change the extremist views. No matter how much time and energy you spent on that 3 or 4% that were looking to divide us, you couldn't change their views. What we had to remind ourselves was the power of the majority and really empower them to counter those views and talk down those views. And it inspired a program that we've got at Multicultural New South Wales called Remove Hate from the Debate, which has now engaged over 2 million people online. And one of our ambassadors is here. Can anyone see he or her? Does anyone know he or her? No? I bet you wouldn't expect, if I got this person to stand up, and he's going to be very uncomfortable with this, but I bet you if I got you to stand up, you could think, nah, he's not it. Could the Remove Hate from the Debate ambassador, James Fry, please stand up? So for those that don't know, And if you've got 5 minutes in your afternoon tea break, go and have a yak to this man. James had a very, very difficult upbringing and at times came to a number of T intersections and by his own admission, hopefully I'm not paraphrasing your roads, chose the low road, right? The path of a sense of what he thought was a falsified belonging and other sorts of things. And James, being one of our ambassadors, is very, very powerful because he shares an authentic lived experience in terms of what it means to be taken down that low road and how unfulfilling that was and how disappointed the James you see today is and all of those different things, but how critical it's been to his learning and to his sense of belonging. And today, James is one of our ambassadors, probably cops a lot of crap, particularly online about being an ambassador, because it's not easy sometimes trying to, stand up for what is right and what is wholesome in a world of keyboard warriors and other people that look for themselves and don't appreciate or be willing to take different perspectives and views. So that Bendigo example, remove hate from the debate, it leads us to part of what it means to be a cohesive society today. And that is very much the empowerment of you. And so we run a lot of programs that are about building resilience in young people. They are about trying to extract their leadership qualities. They are about trying to get them a sense to take a leadership position within their communities, which even within some of our community organisations is very difficult. A lot of our community organisations revere the older generation as they should, but sadly some of our older generation and our leaders hold on to power for far too long and don't empower the young people to come on that journey and for that intergenerational leadership. And so part of all of our role here today is to be able to actually bring different generations, not just to invite young people to the table, but to really nourish their views and to champion their views and be stewards for their views so that they're not just seen as two seats at a table so that you tick the young people box, but they're actually seen as a critical part of your decision-making process to think about tomorrow's problems differently. And so coming back to social cohesion and the role of the interfaith dialogue and other things, that's our job as an agency, is fundamentally to work with you, to try with the modest amounts of money that we have, to invest in you, to help you to do more of those programs. And the one thing that I say to our minister all the time, this is being recorded, isn't it? The one thing I might say to our minister some of the time is the importance of multi-year programs, not just to give you funding for 1 year and then you're like, great, we did this really good program and now we've got to stop it because we don't have any more money. But the importance of trying to work with you in partnership models for numbers of years to help you build that social and that physical infrastructure to kick things off and then to be able to set them up so that they're sustainable and they can keep going. Now, if you haven't worked out, I can talk underwater. And I can talk for a long period of time. But one of the things that I did say to Ida was, this is actually a chance to ask me anything. Like seriously, like I am your person at government. And I know lots of you have got great relationships with different people in the New South Wales government, as you could and you should. But it's actually explicitly written into my position description to hear your voice and to try and champion your voice, as is the role of my team. It's in law, it's in our legislation. The first state in Australia to have multicultural principles, the second state in the world to enshrine multicultural principles. We have an act that actually stipulates in this country, in this state, that you are free to profess your cultural, religious and linguistic differences as long as you adhere to Australian law. I challenge you to think of 5 countries right now that probably don't have that. And they're probably the countries that are the most unstable. I spoke to one of my staff this morning whose family comes from a small village in Russia. And I said, how are you? And I'm okay. I said, how's your brothers and sisters? I honestly couldn't tell you because every conversation that I have with them is filtered. They can't talk about how they feel. They can't talk about the war. They can't even walk around with a book that says war or peace in that country. A way to try and muzzle the large majority that have a strong anti-invasion and anti-war sentiment. I got the privilege. My wife was the chief executive of the Australian Myanmar Chamber of Commerce. The happiest I've ever seen her was the day Aung San Suu Kyi got voted in terms of democracy coming to a country after a military junta for 27 years. The unhappiest I've ever seen her was when she lost her best friend. The second unhappiest day was when that country lost that democratic power. For many of you in the room, you know exactly what I'm talking about because you've lived it. At times, your religions have been the shining beacon for people that have been so far downtrodden that probably the only thing they had in that juncture was their religion to keep them going in that sense of faith and that sense of community and that sense of belonging. And so part of all of our roles in the room, and especially mine as your government agency, is to help give that voice. I just ask you one thing: don't break the law. And I'm serious about that. I have some really robust conversations with people that come from cultures where, really gritty issues like what defines family and domestic violence, or what are traditional practices done to young boys and girls that don't fly here. It's not okay to have a number of partners in this country and think that that's lawful. That's not a thing. But in terms of your culture and your religion and your linguistic differences, absolutely bring it. So I'm going to stop talking. If there's any questions in the room, Ida's looking at me quite nervously. No time. I've talked over. Thanks very much. Have a great afternoon.